I still remember the sound of the door closing behind me. It was sharp and final, like something breaking inside my chest. Daniel stood there, my son, the boy I once carried on my hip while counting pennies for groceries. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just pointed toward the door and said I had to leave. No explanation. No warning. Just like that, I was no longer welcome in the house I helped turn from a dream into reality. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm a widow, and I'm 68 years old. For most of my life, being a mother was not just a role, it was my entire world. After my husband passed away, it was just Daniel and me. Every choice I made, every dollar I earned, every night I stayed awake worrying was for him. I believed that was what love was supposed to look like. That night, I stood frozen in the hallway, holding a small bag with a few clothes inside. The heating was turned low, and the air felt heavy. I looked at Daniel's face, hoping to see doubt, guilt, or even anger. Instead, I saw distance. It was as if he was looking at a stranger, not the woman who raised him. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to remind him of the years I spent working long hours, the times I went without so he could have more. But the words stayed stuck in my throat. Something in his eyes told me he had already made his decision long before that moment. I walked outside, and the cold hit me instantly. My hands were shaking, not just from the weather, but from shock. I kept thinking there had to be some mistake. Sons don't do this to their mothers. Not without a reason. Not without at least a conversation. As I stood there, memories rushed through my mind, Daniel's first day of school, the night he told me he got his first real job, the promises he once made that I would never have to worry again. All of it felt unreal now, like it belonged to someone else's life. I didn't scream. I didn't knock on the door again. I simply walked away, carrying more pain than my small bag could ever hold. I had no idea where I was going, only that the person I trusted most had just turned his back on me. That night wasn't just about being thrown out of a house. It was the moment I realized how fragile trust can be, and how quickly love can turn into silence. And I promise you, the reason behind what Daniel did is far more painful than the cold I felt standing outside that door. When my husband died, the house became very quiet. Daniel was still young, and I knew from that moment on, everything depended on me. There was no time to fall apart. I had a child to raise and a future to protect. I took whatever work I could find and often worked double shifts, sometimes coming home so tired that my legs felt numb. I would smile anyway, because Daniel was watching. Money was always tight. I learned how to stretch $1 until it felt like it might tear. Some nights, I told Daniel I had already eaten so he wouldn't notice my empty plate. I wanted him to grow strong, not worried. I wanted him to feel safe, even when I didn't. Daniel was a good boy. He studied hard and talked about big dreams. He wanted to be successful, to have a life better than the one I could give him. I encouraged every dream, even when I didn't know how I would afford the next step. I believed that love meant finding a way, even when there was none. When it was time for college, the numbers didn't add up. I remember sitting alone at the kitchen table late at night, staring at the bills. That was the night I took off my wedding ring. It was the last thing my husband had given me. I sold it without telling anyone. I told myself it was just a piece of gold, but in truth, it felt like letting go of a part of my past. I did it so Daniel could move forward without guilt. Those years were hard, but they were also full of moments that kept me going. Daniel would come home excited, telling me about his classes and his plans. Sometimes he hugged me and said I was his hero. He promised me that one day I wouldn't have to work so hard anymore. He said I would never be alone. I believed him. Not because I expected something in return, but because I trusted the bond between us. We were all each other had. I thought that kind of connection couldn't be broken by time or success. Looking back now, I see how much of myself I poured into him. Every sacrifice felt worth it then. I never imagined that the same hands I once held to cross busy streets would someday be the ones that let me go. Years passed, and life slowly changed. Daniel became successful, just like he always said he would. When he asked me to sell my small apartment to help him with a down payment on a house, I didn't hesitate. That apartment had been my only real security, but I trusted my son. He told me it would be our home, a place where we could finally live together without worry. After the sale was done, Daniel invited me to move in with him. I remember packing my things carefully, feeling hopeful. I truly believed this was the moment everything I had worked for was coming back to me in a different way, not as money, but as family. The first months felt peaceful. We ate dinner together at the table every night. Daniel would talk about his work, and I would listen, proud of how far he had come. Sometimes we laughed about old memories, and for a while, it felt like we were a family again, not just a mother and a busy adult son. I helped around the house, cooking meals and keeping things neat. I never wanted to feel like a burden. Daniel thanked me often in those early days and told me it was good to have me there. Those words meant more to me than he probably realized. There were small moments that made me believe I belonged. Watching television together in the evenings. Sharing coffee in the mornings. Sitting quietly in the same room without needing to say much at all. It felt safe. I told myself that this was what all those hard years had been leading to. I believed my sacrifices had built something solid, something that couldn't be taken away. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to relax. I didn't notice the cracks forming beneath that comfort. I didn't question the changes in tone or the silences that lasted a little longer than they should have. I held on to the warmth of those early days, convinced that love had finally brought me home. Things began to change after Daniel married Claire Wilson. At first, I tried to convince myself it was normal. A new marriage brings adjustments, I told myself. I stayed quiet and gave them space, believing that was the respectful thing to do. Claire was polite in front of Daniel, but different when we were alone. Her smiles felt forced, and her words often carried a sharp edge. She started making small comments that were easy to ignore but hard to forget. She asked why I was still living there. She reminded me that Daniel was a married man now. She joked about how expensive it must be to take care of extra people in the house. Daniel also changed. He became distant, always tired, always distracted. He stopped joining me for meals. Sometimes his door was locked, and I could hear raised voices behind it. When I asked if everything was okay, he told me not to worry and walked away. Claire began correcting me in front of him, pointing out small mistakes as if they were serious problems. If I cooked, she said the food was too simple. If I stayed quiet, she said I was acting strange. Slowly, I felt like I was being watched, judged, measured. I noticed Daniel listening to her more than to me. When she spoke, he nodded. When I spoke, he grew impatient. I could feel something shifting, but I didn't understand why. I had never asked for anything from them. I stayed out of their decisions. Still, I felt like I was in the way. One evening, I overheard Claire telling Daniel that I was controlling him and making her uncomfortable. She said I was using guilt to stay in the house. Her words cut deep because none of them were true. Yet Daniel didn't defend me. He stayed silent. After that, the house felt colder. Daniel avoided my eyes. Claire stopped pretending to be kind. I began to feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, even though I had nowhere else to go. I kept hoping things would settle down, that Daniel would remember who I was to him. But with each passing day, I realized someone else was shaping his thoughts. And I was slowly losing my place in his life. The night it happened came without warning. Daniel called my name in a sharp voice and told me to come to the living room. Claire was already there, sitting with her arms crossed, her face calm in a way that made my stomach tighten. I knew something was wrong the moment I looked at Daniel's eyes. They were hard and distant. He began accusing me of things that made no sense. He said money had gone missing. He said I was trying to control his life. He said I was the reason his marriage was falling apart. Each word felt heavier than the last. I tried to speak, but he didn't let me. Every time I opened my mouth, he raised his voice and told me to stop lying. I looked at Claire, hoping she would say something, anything. She didn't. She just watched, as if this moment had been planned. Daniel told me I had overstayed my welcome and that I was ruining his peace. Hearing that from my own son felt worse than any insult a stranger could give. I told him I had never taken anything that wasn't mine. I told him I only wanted his happiness. My voice was shaking, but my words were honest. None of it mattered. He walked to my room, pulled out my suitcase, and started throwing my clothes inside without care. I followed him, begging him to slow down, to listen. He dragged the suitcase to the front door, opened it, and pushed it outside. Then he told me to leave. No discussion. No goodbye. Just an order. The door closed before I could say another word. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door as if it might open again. It didn't. I picked up my suitcase with weak hands and walked away into the night. I had nowhere to go. I ended up at a bus station, sitting on a cold bench under bright lights that never dimmed. People passed by, laughing, arguing, living their lives. I felt invisible. I wrapped my coat tighter around me and stared at the floor. That night, I didn't sleep. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't rest. I kept replaying Daniel's words, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. I felt ashamed, heartbroken, and completely alone. By morning, I felt empty. It wasn't just the loss of a home. It was the loss of a son I thought I knew. I realized that night had changed me forever, even though I didn't yet understand how. There was a truth I had carried for years, a truth I never shared with Daniel because I didn't want him to feel ashamed. It went back to the early days of his career, when he was trying to build a name for himself and everything almost fell apart. Back then, Daniel made a serious mistake at work. A bad decision cost him more money than he could afford to lose. He came to me one night, pale and shaking, afraid that everything he had worked for was about to end. He told me his future was on the line and that if this problem didn't disappear, his career would be over before it even started. I listened quietly. I didn't scold him. I didn't remind him of how careful he should have been. I saw fear in his eyes, the same fear he had as a child when he thought he was in trouble. In that moment, I didn't see a grown man. I saw my son. Daniel didn't ask me for help directly. He said he would figure something out. But I knew he couldn't. The amount was too large, and time was running out. That night, after he left, I sat alone and thought about what I could do. I had no savings left. No safety net. But I still had my name and my credit. The next day, I went to the bank and took out a loan in my own name. I didn't tell Daniel. I told myself it was better that way. I used the money to quietly fix his problem, making sure nothing could be traced back to him. His career survived. He moved forward, believing he had been lucky. Years later, when Daniel talked about buying a house, that loan was still part of my life. I used what I could to help with the down payment, tying my finances even deeper to that house. Legally, part of that home was connected to me, even if my name wasn't spoken out loud. I never brought it up because I didn't want gratitude. I didn't want power. I wanted peace. I believed a mother's help should come without conditions. I thought love meant silence. As I sat alone after everything fell apart, that secret weighed heavily on my heart. The house I was thrown out of was built, in part, on sacrifices Daniel never knew about. The pain wasn't just emotional. It was knowing that the truth, if spoken, could change everything, but staying silent had already cost me so much. After that night, I made a quiet decision. I would not beg. I would not stand at Daniel's door asking to be let back in. Whatever pain I felt, I chose to carry it with dignity. I told myself that if I had survived so many hard years before, I could survive this too. An old friend named Helen took me in. We had known each other for decades, though life had pulled us in different directions. When she saw me standing at her door with my suitcase, she didn't ask questions right away. She just hugged me and said I could stay as long as I needed. That kindness helped me breathe again. Living with Helen was simple, but safe. I slept in a small room and helped around the house. At night, I lay awake thinking about how my life had changed so suddenly. Some days were heavy with sadness, but I didn't let it crush me. I reminded myself that I was still standing. As the days passed, I began to think clearly again. I wasn't angry. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted to understand where I stood and how I could protect myself moving forward. For the first time, I thought about my future instead of Daniel's. Helen encouraged me to speak to a lawyer. The idea made me uncomfortable at first. It felt wrong, like I was doing something against my own child. But I also knew I had rights, and ignoring them wouldn't heal anything. I needed facts, not emotions. The lawyer listened carefully as I explained everything. I spoke calmly, even when my voice shook. He told me that what I had done for Daniel mattered more than I realized, and that my contributions were not invisible under the law. Walking out of that office, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. I was a woman who had given much and deserved fairness. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to stand on my own feet again. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt a sense of quiet strength. I didn't know how things would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I would no longer disappear to make others comfortable. The turning point came quietly, without shouting or drama. Daniel received official papers one afternoon, delivered to the house he still believed was fully his. At first, he didn't understand what he was reading. The words felt unfamiliar and heavy, filled with dates, numbers, and names he hadn't expected to see connected to his home. As he read more carefully, confusion turned into panic. The documents explained the loan taken years ago, the financial trail leading back to my name, and the legal connection tying part of the house to me. It was clear and undeniable. The success he believed was built only by his own hands rested partly on sacrifices he had never known about. Daniel felt sick. Memories he had ignored started to surface. Late nights when I looked exhausted. Times I avoided talking about money. Moments that now made sense in a painful way. He realized how little he had asked and how quickly he had believed the worst about me. Then came another shock. Along with those papers were records of debts he had never seen before, all connected to Claire. Credit accounts, unpaid balances, and financial obligations she had kept hidden. The numbers were large enough to explain the constant tension, the pressure, and the fear she carried beneath her calm voice. Slowly, the picture became clear. Claire had been protecting herself. She needed someone to blame, someone Daniel would turn against without question. I had been the easiest target. Every lie she told fit perfectly into the doubts she planted in his mind. Daniel replayed past conversations in his head, hearing them differently now. The accusations. The suggestions. The way she spoke about me when she thought he wasn't listening. He saw how she had twisted small moments into reasons for anger, how she had painted me as a threat instead of family. For the first time, Daniel felt ashamed. Not just for believing her, but for never asking me to explain. He had chosen comfort over truth, silence over understanding. The weight of that choice pressed heavily on him. That evening, the house felt different to him. The walls that once made him feel proud now felt empty. Claire noticed the change in his mood, but this time, her words didn't calm him. He had already seen too much. The truth didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with clarity. And that clarity broke something inside Daniel that could never return to the way it was before. Once the truth came out, everything in Daniel's life began to fall apart. The comfort he once had disappeared piece by piece. Claire was the first thing he lost. When she realized the money was no longer within reach and the house was no longer secure, her patience vanished. The woman who once spoke of loyalty and partnership packed her things without tears. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply left. Daniel tried to stop her, but there was nothing left to hold her there. Without the stability she depended on, the marriage meant nothing to her. The silence she left behind was louder than any fight they had ever had. The house followed soon after. What once felt like a symbol of success became a reminder of mistakes and broken trust. Legal pressure closed in, and Daniel could no longer pretend everything was fine. He walked through the rooms alone, seeing them differently now. Every corner reminded him of what he had destroyed. His pride suffered the most. Daniel had always believed he was strong and independent. Accepting that his achievements were built with help he never acknowledged crushed him. He remembered my face that night, the fear in my eyes, the way he refused to listen. Those memories returned without mercy. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had done. He understood that he hadn't just pushed me out of a house. He had rejected a lifetime of love, care, and sacrifice. He had chosen anger over gratitude, and lies over truth. Alone and humbled, Daniel began to see himself clearly. There was no one left to blame. No one to distract him from his own actions. The success he once showed off meant nothing without the people who helped him get there. Loss taught him what comfort never could. And in that quiet downfall, Daniel finally understood the depth of his betrayal and the pain he caused the one person who never gave up on him. Time passed, and I rebuilt my life slowly, quietly, without asking for anything from Daniel. I stayed strong, not out of anger, but because I refused to let bitterness control me. I focused on myself, my dignity, and the small joys I had once overlooked. I found comfort in simple things, friends who truly cared, peaceful mornings, and the knowledge that I had survived every hardship life had thrown at me. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, looking older, tired, and full of regret. His eyes searched mine, silently asking for forgiveness. He spoke softly, apologizing for everything, throwing me out, believing lies, and letting Claire's manipulation destroy our relationship. He admitted how wrong he had been and how much he had missed me. I listened quietly. I felt the pain of the years melt a little, but I also felt the strength I had gained holding me steady. I realized something important in that moment. I didn't need to punish him. I didn't need revenge. My life wasn't about making him pay, it was about reclaiming myself. I could forgive without forgetting, and I could choose peace without opening myself to more hurt. I told him I forgave him, but reconciliation wasn't necessary. The past could not be erased, and some lessons are too valuable to ignore. Survival, truth, and self-respect mattered more than revenge or anger. That was the real strength I had gained, the kind that doesn't shout or make headlines, but quietly stands firm no matter what. As I closed the door behind him, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house, the accusations, the years of silence and betrayal, they no longer had power over me. I had survived. I had preserved my dignity. I had faced the deepest pain a mother can feel and still stood tall. I reflected on the life I had given Daniel, the sacrifices I had made, and the love that never faltered. A mother's love is strong, enduring, and sometimes taken for granted, but it is also not without limits. Betrayal leaves marks that can last a lifetime, but it cannot erase what is true. Love, patience, and courage endure, even when others fail to recognize them. That is the moral I carry with me. The deepest revenge isn't destruction. It isn't shouting, suing, or making someone pay. The deepest revenge is survival. It's truth. It's standing tall in your own life, holding on to your values, and letting the consequences of betrayal teach lessons that no anger can ever match. I had lost a son for a time, but I had found myself. And that was worth more than anything I could have taken from anyone else. The life I built after the storm was mine, and no one could take that away.